Picture a medieval village at twilight, where the air is thick with wood smoke and the faint, sharp sting of life's unwashed edges. Tonight, we're not chasing knights or crowns, but sinking into the gritty pulse of survival, where hygiene was a gamble against plague and filth clung like a shadow. Imagine peasants scouring hands with vinegar-soaked rags, their linen shifts a fragile shield against sweat, or ancient cities carving hidden drains to defy decay. Far across time, explorers paddle untamed rivers, their ink-stained journals heavy with dreams. These tales of grime, ingenuity, and quiet courage whisper of souls who faced a world raw and unforgiving. Can you smell the damp straw? Feel the weight of a worn comb? They're not just history. They're heartbeats, stubborn and alive. Dim the lights, let the night's hush wrap you close, and wander with me into this pungent, soulful past where every small act of care was a triumph, a flicker of hope in the dark. Welcome to a shadowed nook of history, friend, where the air hums with the faint tang of wood smoke and a sharper, earthier note. Picture a medieval hamlet at dusk, its rooftops soft against a fading sky, the glow of lanterns flickering in crooked lanes. A bell chimes low from the church, its echo mingling with the groan of a cart and the murmur of weary voices. You're not here for grand sagas of crowns or conquests, but for a humbler tale woven into the grit and scent of daily life. Let's embark tonight, easing into the raw, curious world of medieval hygiene, a niche where fear, faith, and a fierce will to endure shaped every wipe and whiff. Settle deep, let the clamor of now slip away, and wander with me through this pungent, captivating past, carried by the quiet pulse of a distant hearth. Step into a 14th century market town, friend, where the bustle of hooves and hawkers fills the air. As you draw breath, though, the scene shifts. No crisp breeze greets you, but a heavy weave of sweat, dung, and a sourness best left unnamed. This is the medieval world, where hygiene wasn't a polished art, but a high-stakes wager, a mosaic of habits stitched from superstition, scarcity, and survival. Cleanliness, as we'd call it, was a fleeting hope, not from love of grime, but from dread of water's betrayal. Bathing, once a cherished rite, had turned perilous, whispered to unlock the body's gates to disease. A warm soak wasn't solace. It was a dare to death, or so they thought. Don't mistake this for folly. It was life's hard math, forged in an era when the Black Death's claws cast a long, dark shade, and answers were as scarce as clean wells. Let's linger on this pivot, for it's the story's core. In the early Middle Ages, bathing held a brighter place. Monasteries, heirs to Roman ways, crafted bathhouses where monks dipped in steaming tubs, scouring the day's labor from their skin. Townsfolk, too, flocked to communal pools, their chatter as warm as the water, blending hygiene with fellowship. These bathhouses were a niche, a sanctuary where body and bond were cleansed, a spark of hope in a world of toil. In southern Europe, where milder climes and sturdier pipes lingered, such places thrived longest, their steam a small defiance of hardship. For a time, being clean was not just feasible, but a shared joy, a ritual that knit communities as tightly as a harvest feast. But as centuries rolled, a chill crept in, not of weather, but belie Louis' 13th century. The church's voice grew stern, its gaze fixed on bathhouses' lively hum. Nudity, even in steam's veil, stirred suspicion, a step toward sin. Medical minds, armed with ancient scrolls but blind to germs, added weight. Hot water, they warned, opened pores, letting illness slide in like a thief through an unbarred door. The Black Death's arrival in 1347, reaping half Europe's souls, sealed this fear. Water, once a friend, became a foe, its warmth a trap for plague's unseen sting. Bathing wasn't laziness. It was a calculated risk, weighed against fever's shadow and the church's moral frown. To soak was to tempt fate, and few dared roll that die. Yet, friend, don't picture a realm of filth-crusted rogues. Medieval folk craved cleanliness in their own hard-won way. Without microscopes or faucets, they leaned on cunning. Hands and faces met damp cloths, scented with vinegar or rosewater's faint bloom, a swift shield against dust. Linen undergarments, swapped more often than skin was scrubbed, drank sweat, a silent stand-in for baths. Hair was raked with combs to evict lice, teeth grazed with ash or salt, and herbs rosemary, sage tucked into folds to dull the body's musk. These acts, small but steady, were no accident. They were proof of a people wrestling to stay whole in a world that offered no mercy. Not careless, not clueless, they navigated a labyrinth of dread and doctrine, each choice a thread in survival's weave. This niche of hygiene wasn't just superstition's child. Resources were thin. Heating water for a bath burned precious firewood, better saved for cooking or warmth. Rivers, meant to cleanse, often ran thick with a town's own refuse, their banks a mirror of neglect. The church loomed large, its sermons prizing a pure soul over a polished body. Bathing's link to vice those rowdy bathhouses made modesty the wiser road. A scrubbed spirit, they preached, outshone a scrubbed scalp, and few argued with heaven's gatekeepers. So, folk adapted, dabbing necks, airing tunics, praying their efforts staved off shame or sickness. Hygiene wasn't comfort, it was endurance. A daily bargain with a world that gave no quarter. The medieval mind, friend, saw cleanliness through a different lens. Health wasn't about germs, unknown and unseen, but balance humors aligned, air untainted. Illness came from miasma, bad vapors, not dirty hands. A bath could upset this harmony, softening defenses against fever's creep. Yet, care wasn't absent. Markets sold soaps, harsh with lye, for those bold enough to scrub. Apothecaries offered herbal brews, their sense of frail armor against stench. Even peasants, scraping by, shared tricks boiling water when wells turned foul, or rubbing mint to blunt a day's toil. These were no grand gestures, but they held weight, a quiet defiance of decay in a world where winter or war could snatch life without warning. Community, too, shaped this niche. Women, keepers of hearths, bore hygiene's load, their hands raw from washing cloths or braiding herbs. Men combed kin's hair, a gruff act of bond. Children learned to dodge lice, their nimble fingers threading combs. Neighbors swapped remedies, a shared lore of survival. The church, for all its warnings, offered alms, clean water from monastic springs, bread free of mold. These ties, fragile but fierce, held towns together, their hygiene a collective act, not a lone pursuit. It was less about purity and more about persistence, a stubborn will to face another dawn. As we rest here, friend, let the hamlet's hum surround you, the rustle of thatch, the low bleat of goats. This glimpse of medieval hygiene opens our path, a window into a world where water was foe and care was a delicate craft. What drove those bathhouses, once alive with steam and song, to fade into dusk? That's our next step, into their rise and fall, where fear and faith reshaped a world's ways. For now, let the hearth's faint glow, the whiff of damp straw cradle you. Drift soft. Let this medieval niche, where every breath tells a tale, hold you close. The medieval world's bathhouses, once bright with steam and laughter, now stand silent, their warmth a faded dream. Here, let's tread softly into the gritty heart of sanitation, where waste ruled streets and homes. No pipes hummed below. How did folk face this stubborn filth? This tale flows gentle, friend, a weave of pits, pots, and quiet resolve. No sewers laced medieval towns. Waste was a constant guest, piling in alleys, seeping into soil. Castles offered faint order. Garderobes, stone seats with holes, jutted from towers. Waste plunged to pits or moats, pulled by gravity's hand. No flush, just a chill draft stinging skin. Lords sat, breath held, praying for haste. A slip was a grim jest, whispered in halls. These niches, carved in walls, hinted at ease amid stones cold. Yet, hygiene was a myth. Pits festered, flies swarmed, moats soured, their stench a castle's bitter sigh. Even the grand weren't spared filth's cling. Peasants had no such perch. Woods served a quiet bush, a stream's edge. Villages might dig shared pits, crude and open. Planks bridged them, a squat for all. No walls, no shame. Neighbors swapped tales mid-task, ease born of habit. These pits, shallow and raw, spilled in rain. Rats danced bold. Disease dysentery, typhoid crept unseen. Folk blamed foul air, not germs, their knowledge blind. Cleaning was rare. A new pit, gouged when the stench won, was the fix. This niche held no pride, just survival's blunt edge, a hard truth etched in mud. Night summoned chamber pots, clay or tin, tucked beneath beds. They caught what darkness hid. Kin shared them, a sloshing chore. Dawn sent someone, shivering, to empty them. Windows swung wide. Hardy Lou rang out, a frail warning. Waste splashed streets, aim a prayer, not skill. Passers-by dodged or cursed wet boots. Townsfolk sighed, moved on. Life rolled forward. Streets sloped to ditches, open veins of rot and muck. Rain might rinse them or leave them foul. Pigs, snuffling scraps, were nature's rough sweepers. Gutters clogged, pools brewed a stew of dung and decay. Cities like London choked, the Thames their mirror of shame. The toilet paper was a ghost. Rags, washed for reuse, were gold. Moss, soft and wild, lined forest floors. Straw, coarse but near, stuffed huts. Snow burned in winter's grip, a cruel wipe. Hands, often the left, served last. Right hands clasped, a rule of need. Richer folk hoarded wool scraps, their softness a boast. No flush, no rolls, just thrift or earth's yield. The church turned away. Sin was the soul's stain, not the streets. Yet, priests, robes trailing, winced at air's bite, their prayers no shield. This wasn't chaos, but order, of sorts. Folk knew their pits, their pots, their sidesteps. They lived with filth, not from neglect, but limits. Water fed throats, not drains. Wood warmed hearths, not privies. The Black Death, sweeping in 1347, bared the cost half fell. Graves brimmed. Still, none tied waste to woe. Miasma, not microbes, was foe. They burned sage, knelt, and endured. Towns grew, filth deepened, a cycle unyielding. Women bore the brunt. They tipped pots, scoured rags, hauled buckets to rinse what they could. Hands, raw from lie, held homes firm. Men dug pits, raised garderobes, their toil a grim frame. Children darted, learning streets' bitter maps, dodging splashes. Kinship bound them a shared pit, a neighbor's cry, a pig's grunt shaped life's beat. This niche was no crown, but it held a thin thread in a world of want. And so, the bathhouse faded, its laughter silenced by suspicion. Some were reborn as bakeries, their ovens claiming spaces once warmed by water. Others stood empty, their walls crumbling like forgotten promises. Monks who once bathed in quiet piety mourned the loss, their routines disrupted by a world that now saw water as a curse. In southern Europe, A few bathhouses clung on, their steam rooms still humming in cities like Florence. But even there, the old joy was gone, replaced by caution. The bathhouse's fall wasn't just about sin or sickness. It was a shift in the medieval soul, a retreat from shared spaces to solitary struggles. The niche it carved, once vibrant, now echoed with what might have been, a reminder that even the warmest havens could turn cold. Picture a soft dawn, friend, where the medieval world stirs under a pale sky, the hum of morning prayers blending with the clink of pots. We've left the bathhouses behind, their steamy laughter now a faded echo, sealed by fear and faith. Yet, as the town awakens, hygiene finds new paths, quiet and clever, in this niche where water is suspect. How did people keep clean when tubs were shunned? Let's drift through their gentle solutions, where linen and damp cloths wove a subtle art of staying fresh. Settle close, let the day's rush fade, and follow me into this hushed, resourceful world. The collapse of bathhouses left medieval life with a gaping void, but people didn't yield to dirt. Driven by necessity and wariness, they forged simpler paths to cleanliness. Nobles, flush with wealth, indulged in rare baths, their servants lugging heavy cauldrons to fill wooden tubs, set by roaring hearths. Wisps of lavender or sage swirled in the steam, a fragrant luxury as much as a means to cleanse. Yet these moments were scarce, saved for weddings or when the torment of itch overcame fears of disease. For the common folk, full baths were a distant dream. Firewood was precious, water icy, and the specter of plague loomed large. Instead, they carved out a subtle niche where hygiene spoke in whispers, not shouts. In this world, sponge baths emerged as the cornerstone of daily care, though no actual sponges were used. Soft, worn linen cloths, dipped in bowls of warmed water, took their place. Sometimes, a splash of vinegar cut through grime, or a hint of rosewater lent a faint, fleeting perfume. These clothes glided over hands, faces, and armpits, those hard-working corners of the body sweeping away the day's dust and sweat. Peasants gathered around a single basin by the fire, sharing the ritual with family, each swipe of the cloth a small act of renewal. Nobles, by contrast, had attendants who fussed and dabbed, turning the act into a private ceremony. The method wasn't thorough, but it struck a careful balance, keeping cleanliness within reach while dodging the risks of water. Monks, tethered to strict codes of purity, elevated these routines to a sacred duty. In the hush of cloisters, they washed before prayers, their linen cloths moving with deliberate care. Each stroke was a quiet rebellion against filth, a way to impose order in a world of scarcity and chaos. These daily acts, small as they were, carried weight. They were a refusal to let grime win, a testament to resilience in the face of hardship. Whether in a peasant's cramped cottage or a noble's grand hall, the linen cloth became a tool of defiance, its gentle touch a bulwark against disorder. This niche of hygiene, born from caution and ingenuity, thrived on practicality. Full baths, with their demands on fuel and labor, were a rarity, but the linen cloth and basin were ever present, ready to serve. The process was modest, far from the thorough scrubs of modern times, but it sufficed. It kept shame at bay, preserved dignity, and offered a sense of control in an unpredictable world. The faint scent of rosewater, or the sting of vinegar, lingered as reminders of these efforts, proof that even in the shadow of plague, people found ways to care for themselves. Through these quiet rituals, medieval folk wove a delicate art of staying fresh, their ingenuity a beacon in the dim light of necessity. But the true hero, friend, was linen breathable, absorbent, a shield against sweat. Under tunics and gowns, Shifts and shirts soaked up the body's offerings, changed when coin or time allowed. A fresh shift was a quiet boast, its whiteness a mark of care, even if the skin beneath stayed unwashed. Washing linen was easier than washing flesh. No pores to fear, no sin to confess. Boiled in lye or scrubbed by rivers, these garments carried the burden of hygiene, letting folks sidestep water's risks. In this niche, a clean shirt was as good as a bath, a practical magic that kept shame at bay. And so, medieval hygiene found its footing, not in grand soaks but in modest gestures. Sponge baths and linen shifts were no match for modern showers, yet they held the line, a testament to a people's grit. As we linger here, the morning light grows stronger, the town's hum a soft lullaby. This tale of quiet cleansing is but one thread in our weave, a glimpse of ingenuity under pressure. What of their hair, their breath, their battle with scent? That's where we're bound next, into the fragrant, itchy world of combs and cloves. For now, let the linens rustle, the basin's gentle drip hold you. In the medieval world, where sponge baths and linen shifts kept grime at bay, people turned to clever tricks for hair, teeth, and scent. Now, let's explore how they managed their locks, breath, and odor, using herbs, combs, and hope to carve out dignity. This tale flows gently, friend, a soft hum of resilience. Hair was a point of pride, even in a world of itch and dust. Lye soap, made from ash and fat, cut through grease but stung like a wasp. Many chose softer paths. Egg yolks lent shine, slick and strange, dripping in cold huts. Vinegar, steeped with rosemary, washed away dirt and left a sharp green scent. Beer, yeasty and warm, doubled as a rinse, chasing lice and adding a tavern's tang. These weren't daily tasks. Water was scarce, fuel precious. Washing hair was a rare act, done when the scalp rebelled or a feast loomed. Combs, though, were constant, carved from bone or horn. Their teeth snared lice and tangles. Folk combed by firelight, raking through strands, a small defiance of chaos. These combs, often etched with care, were heirlooms, binding families across years. Lice were no shame, just life, a buzzing guest everyone shared. Teeth demanded grit, not gloss. No brushes existed. Linen rags, rough and ready, scrubbed with salt or rosemary ash. The goal wasn't white smiles, but keeping gums from rot. Chewing sticks, whittled from hazel or elm, frayed into bristles. You gnawed the end, then scraped, bark's faint bite lingering. For breath, fennel seeds or mint leaves, chewed slow, masked ale's sour edge. Cloves, rare and costly, were a lord's treat, their spice a fleeting shield. Common folk relied on herbs from the hedge. Vinegar rinses, sharp as a blade, were for those with coin, but most made do with water and will. Barbers, moonlighting as surgeons, yanked teeth with pliers, no mercy or numbing. Pain was brief, infection the real foe. Yet, with little sugar in diets, teeth lasted longer than we'd guess, a quiet triumph over time. Scent was trickier, a battle against the body's truth. Sweat wasn't sin, it was honest. Still, folk fought it. Alum powder, ground from stone, curbed underarm sting, its bite a faint guard. Sage or lavender, tucked into sleeves, offered a whiff of field over flesh. Pomanders, small orbs of cloves and musk, hung like talismans. Their spice cut through the town's fog of manure and smoke. Nobles waved scented cloths, dodging market stench, their rose oil a whisper of wealth. Peasants braided herbs into hair, rosemary's bite a humble charm. Linen undershirts, changed when possible, soaked up sweat, a first line of defense. Wool tunics, heavy and hot, trapped odor like a furnace. Changing them was rare, washing them was rarer. The niche scent was less about banishing smell and more about softening it, blending into the shared air. These acts of combing, scrubbing, and masking were small but deliberate. They weren't about vanity alone. A neat braid, fresh breath, or faint herb scent signaled care, even in hardship. Women especially bore this burden, their hands weaving rosemary or rubbing ash, keeping families presentable. Men, too, combed and chewed, their efforts a nod to community. The church, ever watchful, cared little for scent, but much for modesty. A clean appearance, not a clean body, pleased the priest. This balance, struck in dim huts or by muddy streams, showed a people unwilling to yield to filth. Hygiene's tools were simple, but ingenious. Combs, rags, and herbs filled gaps left by water's absence. They couldn't match modern soaps or sprays, but they worked, in their way. Diets low in sweet spared teeth. Linen caught sweat before it soured. Herbs drowned out the worst of the air. The medieval world didn't smell sweet, but it wasn't chaos. It was effort, etched in every combed strand or chewed seed. This niche, fragile yet fierce, held folk together, a thread of pride in a tapestry of toil. From combs and cloves, we've brushed the edges of medieval care, a niche where scent and pride held sway. Now, let's wade into murkier waters. Streets reek, waste lingers. Sanitation shapes this world's rough pulse. How did folk manage filth when pipes were dreams? This tale hums soft, friend, a gritty weave of pits and pots. No sewers ran beneath medieval towns. Filth was no stranger. It piled in alleys, a constant guest that no one could fully banish. Mud mixed with dung, with rotting food, with the quiet gifts left by dogs, horses, and pigs. The ground itself was stained, never dry, never sweet. Summers baked the stench into the air. Winters froze it beneath thin crusts of ice. In every season, it clung to boots, to hems, to nostrils. Castles offered a touch of order. Garderobes, stone seats with holes, perched high in towers. Waste plunged to pits or moats below. Gravity did the work. No flush, no fuss. Yet, drafts bit bare skin. A fall was a grim jest told by servants in hushed corners. Lords sat, shivered, and prayed for quick business. These closets, carved into thick stone walls, were a niche, a nod to comfort amid stone's chill. But they weren't clean. Pits festered, flies swarmed, moats turned foul, their stink a castle's sour breath, rippling through courtyards like an unwanted guest that no curtain could block. Peasants had no such luxury. The wood sufficed, a quiet bush, a stream's edge. Villages might dig communal pits at the outskirts. Rough planks spanned them, a shared squat. No walls, no shame. Neighbors swapped tales mid-task, their ease born of habit and necessity. Privacy was a luxury few could afford. These pits, shallow and crude, overflowed when rains came. Rats danced in their depths, quick and bold. Disease dysentery, typhoid, the bloody flux crept from them, unseen. No one knew why. They blamed bad air, not the unseen world of germs. The miasma theory ruled hearts and minds. Cleaning was rare. A new pit, dug when the stench won, was the fix. This niche of necessity held no pride, only survival's blunt edge. At night, chamber pots ruled, clay or metal. Tucked under beds, they caught what darkness hid. Families shared them, each trip a sloshing chore. By dawn, someone, usually the youngest or lowest, braved the cold to empty them. Windows opened, Gardy-Loo echoed. Waste splashed streets below. Aim was a hope, not a skill. Passers-by dodged or cursed, depending on their luck. Townsfolk shrugged. It was life. Streets sloped gently to ditches, open sewers of mud and rot, carrying their slow burdens downhill. Rain might rinse them, or it might spread the filth wider. Pigs roamed freely, snuffling at scraps, nature's grim little maids with curly tails. Gutters clogged, pools formed, a stew of dung, blood from butchers' stalls, and decayed vegetables shimmered beneath buzzing flies. Cities like London choked on their own breath. The Thames, a mighty river, once clean, became a mirror of filth. Tanners poured their waste into it. Butchers let blood flow freely. Fishmongers tossed their rotten wares along the banks. The rivers swelled and carried it all, downstream toward other towns, spreading the stench like a slow curse. In summer, the air grew heavy. Men tied herbs to their faces to block the stink. Even kings covered their noses with perfumed cloth. The air itself felt thick, sour with rot and hopelessness. Toilet paper was a faint dream. Rags were best, washed and reused. A small mercy for those who could afford cloth. Moss, soft and free, lined forest floors, nature's quiet gift for peasants. Straw, scratchy but handy, served in huts where little else was available. Snow stung in winter, a cruel, biting wipe that left skin raw. Hands off in the left were the last resort. Right hands shook, gestured, and blessed. Left hands served darker duties. This quiet rule crossed lands and classes alike. The wealthier folk kept scraps of wool or hemp, a small boast of comfort in a world that offered little. The church, powerful in matters of soul, cared little for such earthy concerns. Sin was the spirit stain, not the streets. Yet priests winced at the stench, their long robes no shield. Monasteries built latrines over running streams, a rare nod to cleanliness born of discipline and order. But even these holy places were not immune. Pilgrims came, crowds gathered, and soon the streams slowed, their waters darkened by the weight of too many sins. And yet, life marched on. Children played in those streets. Vendors hawked wares by those gutters. Lovers whispered promises beneath windows that emptied their chamber pots into the dark. The smell was part of the world, a background hum like birdsong, though far less sweet. This sanitation, or lack of it, wasn't chaos. It was order, of a kind. Folk knew their pits, their pots, their paths to dodge. They lived with filth, not from neglect, but from limits. No pipes, no pumps. Water was for drinking, not wasting. Wood for fires, not latrines. The Black Death, sweeping in 1347, sharpened the cost. Half fell, graves overflowed. Still, no one linked waste to woe. Miasma, not microbes, was the foe. They burned herbs, prayed, and endured. Towns grew. Filth deepened. A cycle unbroken. Women bore the weight. They emptied pots, scrubbed rags, hauled water to rinse what they could. Their hands, raw from lie, held households firm. Men dug pits, built garderobes, their labor a grim frame. Children ran, dodging splashes, learning streets' cruel maps. The community bound them. A shared pit, a neighbor's shout, a pig's grunt. These were life's rhythm. The niche of sanitation was no triumph, but it held a fragile thread in a world of want. Despite the stink, folk found balance. They swept doorsteps, tossed waste far as arms allowed. Monasteries with deeper wells offered cleaner corners. Some towns tried rules dump after dark, clear ditches. Few obeyed. Survival trumped law. Yet, ingenuity flickered. A pot's lid, a pit's plank, a rag's reuse. These were small victories, unsung, but vital. The medieval world didn't conquer filth, but it faced it, stubborn and unbowed. How did folk manage filth when pipes were dreams? This tale hums soft, friend, a gritty weave of pits and pots. No sewers ran beneath medieval towns. Beneath timber beams and thatched roofs, filth was no stranger. It piled in alleys, seeped between cobblestones, gathered in the shadows where eyes turned away. The air carried its bitter perfume, a blend of rot, dung, sweat, and smoke. Every breeze brought it close. Life pressed on inside this invisible fog. Castles offered a touch of order, though even their stone walls could not fully keep filth at bay. Garderobes, simple stone seats with holes, perched high in towers. Waste plunged down shafts to pits or moats below. Gravity did the work. No flush, no fuss. Yet, drafts bit bare skin. Winter winds sliced through gaps in stone. A fall was not unheard of. A grim jest whispered by servants. Lords sat, shivered, and prayed for quick business. These narrow closets carved into thick walls were a niche, a small luxury in a harsh world. But they weren't clean. Pits festered. Flies swarmed. Maggots wriggled. The moats, fed by these streams of waste, turned foul choking under the weight of their own decay. A castle's sour breath drifted through the courtyards, no matter how grand the halls above. Peasants had no such luxury. Their world was simpler, harsher. The woods sufficed. A quiet bush, the edge of a stream, a hollow dip in the earth. In villages, some effort was made communal pits dug at the outskirts, rough planks placed across for balance. No walls, no shame. Neighbors squatted side by side, swapping gossip mid-task. Their comfort born not from privacy, but from shared hardship. These pits were shallow, crude, and quick to overflow after rains. Rats danced at the bottom, bold and fat, thriving on the endless banquet. Disease, dysentery, typhoid, the ever-feared flux spread quietly. No one understood why. The air was blamed, cursed as bad humors. Germs were still a mystery waiting centuries to be discovered. Cleaning was rare. When the stench grew too fierce or the pit too full, another hole was dug nearby. That was the solution. A simple, brutal rhythm. Use, endure, abandon, repeat. This niche of necessity offered no pride, only the blunt reality of survival. And when night fell, chamber pots ruled the home. Clay or metal, simple bowls tucked under wooden beds, caught what the darkness demanded. Entire families shared these vessels, their contents sloshing quietly, as someone, often a child or servant, braved the cold dawn to carry them out. Windows creaked open. Hardy morning. The cry rang through narrow streets. From the French Gardelot, beware the water, it was both warning and tradition. Waste splashed the streets below, landing wherever chance directed it. Precision was rare. Pedestrians dodged or cursed, depending on their luck, yet most simply shrugged. It was life. The streets themselves sloped gently, guiding the runoff toward open ditches, crude gutters that snaked along every road. These ditches were open sewers thick with mud, rot, and the many offerings of daily life. Rain might rinse them clean, but often it only spread the mess further, diluting but never erasing. In summer, the mixture baked beneath the sun, releasing its pungent bouquet into the air. In winter, it stiffened into icy mounds, trapping the filth until thaw returned it to flow. Pigs roamed freely, nature's grim maids. They snuffled through the muck, feeding on what others left behind: spoiled food, scraps of meat, vegetable peels, even human waste. Town officials encouraged their presence. The pigs cleaned what people dared not touch, but their work was imperfect. Gutters clogged, pools formed, and the stew of dung, rot, and decay settled into every crevice. Cities like London choked on their own breath. The great Thames, once bright and clean, became a mirror of filth. Tanners poured their vile runoff into the water's lime-soaked hides. Rotting flesh, chemicals that stung the skin. Butchers let blood flow from their stalls into the streets and rivers. Fishmongers tossed spoiled catch along the banks. The river swelled, a slow-moving vein carrying the city's waste downstream. In warm months, the stench grew unbearable. Men tied bundles of lavender or mint beneath their noses to mask the air. Kings, too, were not spared. They clutched perfumed cloths beneath their noses as they rode through their own streets, pretending not to notice the rot beneath their gilded carriages. Toilet paper? A distant dream. Rags were prized, washed, and reused until threads wore thin. Moss, soft and free, blanketed forest floors, a quiet, green luxury for peasants who ventured beyond the village. Straw, though scratchy, served in huts where choices were few. Snow stung cruelly in winter, but even that was better than bare hands. When desperation struck, hands often the left were the final tool. Right hands greeted, gestured, and prayed. Left hands served darker purposes, an unspoken rule that crossed all borders of class and country. The wealthier folk kept scraps of wool or soft hemp, small indulgences that whispered of comfort. A noblewoman might keep her clothes neatly folded, perfumed faintly to ease the task. But even in the finest halls, the process was crude compared to the luxuries we know. The church, always concerned with matters of the soul, paid little heed to these earthy struggles. Sin stained the spirit, not the street. Yet even priests winced beneath their heavy robes as the odors crept into sanctuaries. In monasteries, stricter rules governed cleanliness. Latrines built over running streams allowed for some semblance of sanitation. But even there, the flow eventually slowed, clogged by too many sins washed into its course. Despite it all, life pulsed on. Children played in these streets, hopping over puddles and dodging pigs. Vendors called out their wares beside open ditches. Lovers whispered beneath windows that emptied chamber pots to the ground below. The filth was not an event, it was a presence. As common as the sunrise, they lived with it, around it, in spite of it. And so, friend, as we sit here, warm and distant, let your thoughts wander through those narrow, crooked lanes. Hear the clatter of wooden carts, the soft bleating of sheep led through the marketplace, the buzz of flies in the morning sun. This was their world, a niche of waste and resilience, of bitter air and stubborn hearts that refuse to break. There is more yet to explore. Next, we'll drift into their kitchens, where fires crackled and hunger ruled. There, amid the smoke and clatter of iron pots, another tale waits. No sewers ran beneath medieval towns. Filth was no stranger. It piled in alleys, a constant guest. Castles offered a touch of order. Garderobes, stone seats with holes, perched high in towers. Waste plunged to pits or moats below. Gravity did the work. No flush, no fuss. Yet, drafts bit bare skin. A fall was a grim jest. Lords sat, shivered, and prayed for quick business. These closets, carved into walls, were a niche, a nod to comfort amid stone's chill, but they weren't clean. Pits festered. Flies swarmed. Moats turned foul. Their stink, a castle's sour breath. Peasants had no such luxury. Wood sufficed. A quiet bush, a stream's edge. Villages might dig communal pits. Rough planks spanned them, a shared squat. No walls, no shame. Neighbors swapped tales mid-task, their ease born of habit. These pits, shallow and crude, overflowed in rain. Rats danced in their depths. Disease, dysentery, typhoid crept from them, unseen. No one knew why. They blamed bad air, not germs. Cleaning was rare. A new pit, dug when stench won, was the fix. This niche of necessity held no pride, only survival's blunt edge. At night, chamber pots ruled. Clay or metal, tucked under beds, they caught what darkness hid. Families shared them, a sloshing chore. By dawn, someone braved the cold to empty them. Windows opened. Gardy Lou echoed. Waste splashed streets below. Aim was a hope, not a skill. Passers-by dodged, or didn't. Townsfolk cursed, then shrugged. It was life. Streets sloped to ditches, open sewers of mud and rot. Rain might rinse them, or not. Pigs roamed, snuffling scraps, nature's grim maids. Gutters clogged, pools formed, a stew of dung and decay. Cities like London choked on their own breath. The Thames, a mirror of filth. Toilet paper was a faint dream. Rags were best, washed and reused. Moss, soft and free, lined forest floors. Straw, scratchy but handy, served in huts. Snow stung in winter. A cruel wipe. Hands, often the left, were last resort. Right hands shook, a rule born of need. Wealthier folk kept wool scraps, a small boast. No flush, no tissue, just what nature or thrift allowed. The church cared little for such matters. Sin was the spirit's stain, not the streets. Yet, priests winced at stench, their robes no shield. This sanitation, or lack of it, wasn't chaos. It was order of a kind. Folk knew their pits, their pots, their paths to dodge. They lived with filth, not from neglect but from limits. No pipes, no pumps. Water was for drinking, not wasting. Wood for fires, not latrines. The Black Death, sweeping in 1347, sharpened the cost. Ha fell, gravis overflowed. Still, no one linked waste to woe. Miasma, not microbes, was the foe. They burned herbs, prayed, and endured. Towns grew, filth deepened, a cycle unbroken. From the medieval world's combs and cloves, where scent and care carved a quiet niche, we now step into a grittier realm. Streets hum with waste's heavy pulse. No pipes snake below. How did folk wrestle this stubborn muck? This tale whispers soft, friend, a weave of pits, pots, and raw endurance. No sewers threaded medieval towns. Filth was a familiar shadow, piling in alleys, seeping into earth. Castles offered a faint order. Garderobes, stone benches pierced with holes, jutted from high towers. Waste fell to pits or moats, pulled by gravity's unyielding hand. No valves, no flush, just a cold draft biting bare thighs. Lords perched, breath held, hoping for swift relief. A slip was a grim jest, whispered in halls. These niches etched into walls promised ease amid stone's chill, yet cleanliness was a lie. Pits festered, their stench rising like a curse. Flies buzzed, thick as fog. Moats, once proud, soured, their reek of a castle's bitter exhale. Peasants knew no such perch. Forests served. A hidden bush, a stream's bank. Villages might gouge communal pits, crude and open. Rough planks bridged them, a shared squat. No curtains, no modesty. Neighbors traded gossipy mid-task, their ease a blunt habit. These pits, shallow and raw, spilled in storms. Rats scurried, bold as thieves. Disease, dysentery, cholera slunk from them, invisible. Folk pointed to foul air, not germs, their science blind. Cleaning was a stranger. When stench won, a new pit was dug, earth's fresh scar the only fix. This niche held no glory, just survival's hard edge. Night brought chamber pots, clay or tin, nestled under beds. They caught what darkness veiled. Families shared them, a sloshing burden. Dawn sent someone, shivering, to empty them. Windows swung wide, rang out, a warning more hope than truth. Waste rained on streets, aim a fleeting prayer. Passers-by ducked or cursed wet boots. Townsfolk sighed, then moved on. Life endured. Streets slanted to ditches, open veins of mud and rot. Rain might scour them, or leave them stagnant. Pigs, snuffling scraps. were nature's rough sweepers. Gutters choked, pools bloomed a brew of dung, decay, and despair. Cities like London gasped, the Thames a mirror of their shame. Straw, coarse but near, stuffed huts, snow burned in winter, a cruel swipe. Hands, often the left, served when nothing else did. Right hands clasped, a custom born of grit. Wealthier folk hoarded wool scraps, their softness a small boast. No flush, no rolls, just what thrift or trees gave. The church turned blind eyes, sin-stained souls, not streets. Yet, priests, robes trailing, flinched at the air's bite, their sermons no shield. This wasn't lawless mess. It was structure, of sorts. Folk knew their pits, their pots, their dodging steps. They lived with filth, not from sloth, but limits. Water was for throats, not drains. Wood-fed hearths, not privies. The Black Death, clawing in 1347, bared the toll. Half perished, graves brimmed. Still, none tied waste to woe. Miasma, not microbes, was the enemy. They lit herbs, knelt in prayer, pressed on. Towns swelled, filth thickened, a wheel that spun without end. Women carried the load. They tipped pots, scoured rags, lugged buckets to rinse what they could. Hands, chapped by lie, held homes steady. Men gouged pits, raised garderobes, their toil a grim scaffold. Children darted, learning streets' bitter map, sidestepping splashes. Kinship wove them tight. A shared pit, a neighbor's cry, a pig's grunt. These were life's beat. The niche of sanitation was no crown, but it endured, a thin thread in a world of want. Balance flickered amid the stink. Doorsteps were swept, waste hurled as far as strength allowed. Monasteries, with deeper wells, lent cleaner nooks. Some towns set rules, dump after dusk, clear channels, few heeded. Need outranked edicts. Yet, sparks of cunning shone. A pot's cover, a pit's board, a rag's second life. These were triumphs, small but fierce. The medieval world didn't tame filth, but it met it, unyielding. This niche of muck, raw and real, held folk fast, their grit a quiet fire. Now, we drift from these reeking lanes to ancient cities, where stone and foresight wove cleaner tales. Mohenjo-daro's drains and Babylon's gates call, a niche of order far from medieval grime, from Hadrian's marble dreams, where Rome's heart pulsed with order and art. We now cross oceans and centuries to America's untamed wilds. Here, let's paddle the Missouri's churning waters, where Lewis and Clark chased a young nation's hope. This tale drifts soft, friend, a weave of grit, rivers, and uncharted skies. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson doubled America's reach with the Louisiana Purchase, a 15 million gamble that added 800,000 square miles of mystery. What lay beyond the Mississippi? Rivers, peaks, or perils unknown? Jefferson, ever curious, sought answers. He tapped Meriwether Lewis, his secretary, a man of science and nerve. Lewis chose William Clark, his old comrade, a cartographer with a soldier's steel. Together, they'd lead the Corps of Discovery, a mission to map the West, seek a water route to the Pacific, and claim America's place. Jefferson's charge was clear: study lands, tribes, and beasts, and tread lightly among nations already there. This niche wasn't conquest. It was knowledge, a fragile bridge to a boundless frontier. On May 14, 1804, the Corps launched from Camp Dubois near St. Louis. 33 men, a keelboat, and 2 pirogues carried 10 tons of gear compasses, beads, muskets, and a quirky iron frame boat that never quite worked. The Missouri River, their highway, fought them at every bend. Sandbars shifted, currents roared, and tangled forests slowed their oars. Lewis cataloged fish and flies with a scholar's zeal, while Clark sketched rivers, his maps a lifeline for those to come. Mosquitoes plagued them, gnats stung, and bison loomed vast on endless plains. By August, in what's now Iowa, they met the Oto and Missouri tribes. Peace medals gleamed, but mistrust simmered. Diplomacy was a tightrope, each step a risk. Autumn brought the Great Plains chill. The Missouri slowed, ice creeping at its edges. By November, the Corps reached Mandan villages in North Dakota, earth-lodged homes rich with corn and trade. Here, they built Fort Mandan, a log haven against winter's bite. Temperatures plunged below zero, frost gnawing fingers. Yet, work hummed Lewis noted tribal tongues, Clark measured stars. The Mandan, seasoned hosts, shared food but watched warily. Tensions flared, eased by gifts and talk. A stroke of fate arrived. Toussaint Charbonneau, a French trapper, and his Shoshone wife, Sacagawea. Her knowledge of Western trails, her calm under pressure, made her a guide beyond price. Her newborn son, Jean-Baptiste, joined the trek, a tiny spark in the cold. Spring 1805 saw the Corps shed Fort Mandan's walls. Lighter now, they paddled west, mosquitoes a relentless cloud. Sacagawea proved her mettle, saving Clark's journals from a capsized pirogue with steady hands. By June, the Great Falls of the Missouri, a chain of 5 cascades, halted them. Portaging took a month, men hauling boats over cliffs, feet torn, backs bent. The Rockies loomed, not gentle hills, but jagged giants. Hopes of a smooth river path faded. In August, Sacagawea's brother, a Shoshone chief, offered horses and guides, a reunion that turned peril to providence. The Bitterroot Mountains waited. Their icy trails attest no river could match. September brought the Corps to the Bitterroot's brutal spine. Narrow paths wound through snow and stone. Horses slipped, men starved, game vanished, forcing them to eat candles, roots, even their steeds. Lolo Pass was a frozen hell, frostbite clawing, moccasins shredded. Clark's journal grew grim, tallying hunger's toll. Yet they pressed on, collapsing into Nez Perce lands, where kindness met them. The tribe fed them salmon and camas, nursed their frostbitten limbs, and taught them to carve canoes. This niche of survival leaned on native grace, not just American grit. October saw new canoes slice the Columbia River, a beast of rapids and rock. Boats bucked, men clung, gear nearly lost. Chinook and Sahaptin tribes, rich in salmon trade, eyed the strangers warily. Some offered fish, others haggled hard. Rain fell, relentless, molding clothes, souring powder. Forests thickened, lush but cruel, their damp a constant ache. By November 1805, the Corps glimpsed the Pacific, a gray churn under storm clouds. No triumph rang, just wet boots and weary eyes. They built Fort Clatsop near modern Astoria, a soggy shelter of logs and fleas. Winter rained daily, save 12. Elk meat, tough and lean, barely staved off scurvy. Lewis wrote of sea otters. Clark refined maps, their pens a stubborn light. March 1806 turned them east, the Pacific's roar behind. The Columbia fought harder now, its currents fierce. Supplies dwindled, trade strained. Chinook tribes, sensing change, grew cool. The Bitterroots, crossed in warmer light, still taxed their bones. Nez Perce horses, kept safe, carried them to the Missouri's flow. Lewis and Clark split the Corps. Lewis probed the Marias River, Clark the Yellowstone. Lewis's path turned bloody. A Blackfeet clash left 2 dead, the expedition's only violence. Clark's canoes fared better, dodging bison herds. By August, they reunited, leaner, scarred, the thrill of the quest now a grind. September 23, 1806, saw St. Louis rise through dawn's haze. The core, tattered, returned after 8,000 miles, 2 years, and 50 tribes met. Maps bloomed precise, journals brimmed with elk, grizzlies, and stars. Jefferson rejoiced, newspapers hailed heroes, yet fates diverged. Lewis, named Louisiana's governor, sank into shadow debt, drink, despair. In 1809, he died, perhaps by his hand, a wound history can't heal. Clark thrived, governing Missouri, shaping the West, his son named for his lost friend. Sacagawea faded west, her end unclear, her legend sharp. York, Clark's enslaved man, begged freedom, denied too long, a bitter note in triumph's song. The Corps' legacy is a tangled thread. They charted rivers, named peaks, and opened trails for settlers' boots. Over 300 species, new to science, filled their pages. America's claim grew bold, nudging Britain and Spain. But native lands, mapped without consent, bore the cost. Tribes who fed and guided them faced displacement's tide. This niche of discovery wasn't pure. It was ambition, courage, and clash, a mirror of a nation's dawn. From Missouri's restless flow, where Lewis and Clark etched America's dream, we pause to weave our journey's threads. Part 8 carried us through wild rivers, a niche of courage and clash. Now, let's rest by this final hearth, where medieval grime, ancient stones, and far-flung trails whisper their truths. Medieval hygiene, raw and stubborn, showed folk dodging filth with rags and hope. Bathhouses faded, yet linen and herbs held pride's faint glow. Pits and pots reeked, but ingenuity flickered a lid, a moss wipe, small wins against rot. Ancient cities, from Mohenjo-Daro's drains to Teotihuacan's stars, carved order where chaos loomed, their bricks a hymn to shared care. Hadrian's Rome, with walls and domes, blended steel and soul, his steps a map of unity marred by Judea's scars. Lewis and Clark, paddling through hunger and ice, charted a frontier, their journals a spark for a nation's rise, yet shadowed by native loss. These tales, friend, aren't just dust and dates. They hum with grit, women scrubbing pots, builders laying stone, explorers sketching stars. Each faced their world's edge, not with ease but with will. Their niche, whether a comb scrape or a river's roar, was survival's quiet art. Today, our taps flow, our cities hum, but their lessons linger. Savor the clean, share the load, tread light on others' lands. Histories weave filth, order, quest binds us still. As embers fade, let's carry their spark. No next part waits, just a soft, close. Medieval huts, ancient grids, Roman roads, frontier trails they blur into night's hush. Sleep now, friend, held by their stubborn pulse, a lullaby of those who endured.